Are you developing a Gradle Project plugin that provides a task that users can execute? This video will teach you how to add a task to your plugin. Here, we're referencing a sample finish plugin. By the end of this section, we will demonstrate how to author a custom task type. It has inputs, an output, and a task action. And then in the plugin class, we will use the custom task type to register a task and configure it. In the next chapter, we will use the plugin consumer project to manually test the task and cover how to author unit tests for the task as well. To get started, in the documentation, you can search for creating and registering tasks. On this page, there are many example custom task types you can reference. If you click on Task Inputs and Outputs on the right side menu, you will see an example with both inputs and an output, as well as a task action. We can use this example as a starting point. It is recommended to create a separate file for the task type, just like we did with the extension model. We'll call it coverage lock task. And we'll paste the example from the doc. We'll correct the class name and add the needed imports. Now, if we reference the extension, we can see the task needs to have input for the goal, the Jacoco metric, and the onCI variable. So let's add these in inputs. We'll change this to Jacoco metric. It can remain a property of string. We'll change this to be the goal, and we'll also make it a property. And it'll be a property of float. And we'll add one for the onCI variable. And it'll be a property of Boolean. The file containing the current recorded coverage will be an output, since the task will need to update it with the latest coverage value if it increases. So let's update this output. We'll call it current coverage file, and it'll be a regular file property. There will be one additional input. After the Jacoco task runs, the latest code coverage will be available in a file that it produces. The task needs this file as an input, as it will parse it to get the latest coverage value. So let's add an input file for, we'll call it Jacoco report XML file, and also be a regular file property. We would now code the task action. As a starting point, however, let's have the action just print the input and output values that have been configured. We can use the logger to do this. Logger.lifecycle, and we'll print the goal. Next, we'll print the onCI variable. Next, we'll print the Jacoco report XML file. And then finally, let's also print the current coverage file. And before proceeding to author the rest of the action, let's just set up the wiring of the inputs and outputs and do some sanity testing. So we'll go to the plugin class, and we can register a task. We'll call it lock coverage gains. And it'll be of type coverage lock task. We can set a description for the task. If on a CI machine, checks if coverage increased, and if so, locks in gains to a file. Then we can wire the inputs and outputs using the extension. So the Jacoco metric for the task will be the extension's Jacoco metric. The goal will be the extension's goal that the user has configured. Similarly, the onCI variable will also be fetched from the extension that the user configures. The coverage file will also be fetched from there. So coverage file set extension.coverage file. Now, for the final input, which is the Jacoco report XML file, this will actually be fetched from the output of a Jacoco task. We'll look at that a little later. For now, we'll just set it to a file in the build directory. So we'll say project.layout.build directory.file. We'll just call it report.xml for now. So we'll just assume that this file is there. Like I said, it actually is going to come from an output of a Jacoco task. We'll configure that a little later. We can go ahead and build the plugin. Now we do get an error in our functional test. If we actually take a look at the functional test, it is assuming that we still have a task called greeting. And when we had deleted that task in a previous chapter, we forgot to update this test. So for now, we'll just comment out the fact that in the test we are running a build and we're asserting the output. We'll just comment that out for now. We'll come back to this later when we talk about authoring functional tests. And let's go ahead and we'll do a build. Now we can head over to our consumer project. We'll go ahead and reload it so it picks up the latest build of the plugin. If we list the available tasks, we can see our coverage lock gains task with the description there. If we run it, we can see it fails because the report.xml file doesn't exist. We'll just go ahead and create a file for now, and just so that we can get this passing. And in the build directory, we'll just create a file called report.xml. And let's just go ahead and run the task again. We can see that it prints out the default value for the Jacoco metric, the goal that's been configured, onCI has been configured to be true, the report file location, as well as the coverage file location, which is over here. So we've ensured that the wiring of inputs and outputs has been done correctly. We can now continue authoring the custom task type action. To save time, I will just paste the code from a completed plugin implementation. Let's briefly go over what the action does. If the task is run on a machine that isn't a CI machine, or the Jacoco report file doesn't exist, it exits with a message. It will then try to parse the report file and extract the coverage. If no coverage was found, it will exit with a message. Otherwise, it will check to see if the coverage has increased and if it's still less than our desired goal. If it has increased, it'll update the coverage file. In the next chapter, we will cover how to manually test the task using the consumer project as well as writing unit tests.